Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and all our friends from around the world. It's a great honor and pleasure for me to be able to speak to you and say a few words at the closing of our very successful Asia Global Dialogue 2020. As we all know, this is the signal event for the Asian Global Institute every year. And this year, we're particularly honored to be able to host this first time ever on the web. And it really to the attendance of a record audience from around the world. So first of all, thank you very much. It's my honor and pleasure and great challenge, I think, to really say a few words to close this very important conference. Throughout the day, I think we've heard from really a range of some of the top experts in the world to address some of the most urgent issues of our day. We started with the current state of multilateralism. After we had a very good opening from the president of Hong Kong University, Dr. Zhang Xiang, and on the future of education and so on. And then going on to all the other major issues like sustainability, like the whole idea of addressing how we address inequality, how we address climate change, and then on to the issues of really recovery after the post-COVID economy, and of course, the very important factor that we just went through of technology in today's world. So it's a great honor and pleasure for me to say a few words now in closing. Now, in looking at all the wonderful issues that have been brought up and discussed in great depth during the day, what struck me was that one thing came very much to mind, and it's really providing a common theme. All of them really needs to be resolved, and the challenges are so enormous, has to be dealt with and resolved on a global cooperative basis. And this inevitably leads to the whole issue of multilateralism. What is the state of multilateralism? How do we reconstruct the world's multilateral system to really effectively take on these challenges? Now, when we started preparing for the AGD some months ago, frankly, the outlook for multilateralism was pretty bleak. We had the US-China trade war. We had a lot of issues brought about by the pandemic, also the withdrawal of different countries from major global institutions and so on. And, as a lifelong multilateralist, actually for the last few years, people have said multilateralism is dead. Today, I'm very happy to say that multilateralism is back. I think people are beginning to realize as we move into the post-COVID world, there is absolutely no alternative to really being able to work together and really to think about how do we actually build again a multilateral system. However, let's not get too complacent. I think there are green shoots now in the direction of reconstruction of the global multilateral system. But I think we must be aware that there are multiple challenges on the way, and the road is long and arduous. But however, having said that, I absolutely feel that the time is now. As we see an emergence, hopefully from the COVID-19 pandemic, with the hopefully a very near-term advent of the vaccine, and also with the new US administration coming into the White House early next year, I think it is now time for us to really think deeply about what are we going to do in terms of reconstructing the post-COVID world, and the time is now. Now, in looking at the dimensions of what needs to be in the new multilateral system, three major trends really come to mind that we must take account of, harness, and address. One, I think, is trade and the importance of trade in terms of the recovery of the global economy. I've been a trader my whole life, and that is, in my mind, the lifeblood of the world economy. The second is really how the world is now being completely digitized, and the digital economy and the future evolution of the digital economy. And then finally, last but not least, of course, is the whole issue of climate change that affects all of us. I think in some of the earlier sessions, especially my good friend Andrew Shang, and in his session on multilateralism, I think these were the themes that they looked at very strongly, and I certainly agree. Let me first of all turn to trade. If we look at what the world has really gone through, is really a major recession of tremendous proportions, really comparable, if not worse, than during the Great Depression. So we're really looking at a situation in which the global supply chains are at a virtual standstill and really needs to be re-energized in order to bring the revival of the economy and the return of jobs. Now, in this environment, I think what we really need to do is to think about how trade could actually become the lifeblood of the global economy again, and how do we conduct it in a very strong multilateral basis. Here, I'm really inspired by an agreement that was signed just a few weeks ago, the RCEP, the RCEP, the Regional Cooperation Comprehensive Economic Partnership that was just signed a few weeks ago. And this is really key. It consists of the 15 countries in the Asia region, the 10 countries of ASEAN, plus China, Korea, Japan, and Australia and New Zealand. And it comprises 30% of the global population and the global GDP. And without doubt in my mind, this will be the fastest growing region in the world in the next few years. So what we do with the future development of RCEP, I think will affect all of us, definitely in the region, but will have tremendous implications for the world and also the future of multilateralism. I think RCEP is a breakthrough in three major ways. First, I think it really is a vote of confidence in trade as a way to revive the global economy. The future of trade is really built on the infrastructure that's been put in place and on the connectivity that is actually have been put in place in the last few years, especially in the Asia Pacific region. And it is really facilitated by a series of processes that would actually allow us to harmonize standards and adopt things that are really able to actually make the region work together. You know, in many ways, it reminds me of my friend Tom Friedman's "The World is Flat." There's been a lot of debate on the world is flat recently, and a lot of people said the world is flat is no longer applicable. It's gone. The world is not flat, and let's face it. However, I must say, in my own mind, let's not be so fast. I think flat is back. And there is an opportunity now for us to show how it is coming back in the Asia region. Now, the second major issue is I think RCEP provides an early support for the rising Asian consumption. Asian consumption really plays a major role in the recovery of the world going forward. As we all know, one of the fastest growing and most vibrant consumption markets in the world is Asia. Asia 20 years ago accounted for a third of the global consumption. And 20 years from now, in 2040, it is forecasted to be over half of the world's consumption will be in Asia. In fact, McKinsey in a study points out by 2030, there will be over 2 billion middle-class consumers in Asia. So the Asian consumption is not only good for the region, but actually could be a growth engine that will drive the global economy from recovery to growth. And really, I think this is importantly to know also from a person that works in supply chains and global supply chains, it is really the only region in the world in which we have both a production capacity as well as a strong consumption. It is really all embraced in one world, one region. And really, it really facilitates intra-regional development. And this, in the jargon of us in the global supply chain management business, it's local for local. It's really developing local, but it's not just local for local, frankly. It starts there. But as Asia becomes very vibrant through things like RCEP, I think we can actually look forward to using Asia as a growth driver for the rest of the world. And it really then very much coming to the third point I want to say about RCEP, which is the whole concept of open regionalism. What we have developed in RCEP is not a closed club in which you have to be invited to join. I think the barriers to joining is relatively low. So it really encompasses both the rich and the poor countries and be able to put them into a framework that will allow them to actually either do the production and the consumption and vice versa. So this idea of developing an inclusive approach, I think is also very much a demonstration of how the new multilateral system can work. And this is really the whole idea of open regionalism. The idea, I think, from the 15 countries then initially in RCEP, we hope to be able to encourage more and more countries to join so that eventually it would actually expand to the rest of the world and maybe become the core, the centerpiece of a new multilateral system. Actually, I'm reminded by the words of my friend, Professor Mike Spence, who calls the world today a multi-speed world. There are differences between rich and poor countries, and differences count, differences matter. And the new multilateralism should really find a way to actually embrace this and really address the issue of inclusiveness. Now, let me move on to the second major trend, which is the digital economy. If you think back to the last 15 years, I think the major trend that has actually pervaded the whole world is the whole concept of digitalization. From the time when the internet became more and more popular to what we see today, I think we have completely transformed the world, or potential to transform the world, by the adoption of digitalization and the use of other technologies that are associated, like AI, et cetera, et cetera. Now, this fundamentally, if you talk in business terms or even in daily life terms, changes the speed, the clock speed with which things work. And also, it really empowers the consumer and to really be able to affect all aspects of what they want to buy, the ideas they want to adopt, the services that they want to buy, etc. So digitalization is really very much pervasive in our daily lives, in our businesses, etc. Now, the pandemic, in fact, has accelerated this adoption of technology and this digitalization. So really, with the pandemic, the adoption rates have just gone dramatically shot up. So if we look back at the world in the last 15 years, internet traffic has actually gone up 60 times, more than 60 times actually. And since the pandemic, the percentage of total retail trade done on e-commerce platform has exceeded now 30%. Some people think it may come back down after the pandemic, but I don't think so. If anything, it may head further into the 40% range. Not just the pure online, but the idea of merging online and offline into an omni-channel experience, I think is going to be the future. Now, I'm happy to say that Asia is at the forefront of this digital innovation. Asia, in many ways, led by China and what's happening in the digitalization there, and other countries in the ASEAN region and so on, are really at the forefront of this change. One very good example is the last year, 25 Asian nations signed the first framework agreement on the facilitation of cross-border paperless trade. And that under the auspices of the UN SCAP, part of the United Nations for this region. And it's really based on the whole principle of interoperability, mutual recognition, and harmonization of standards. This is exactly the way the world has to go. And Asia has taken the lead and became that demonstration model. That to me is crucial. The mindset of multilateralism is to really drive digitalization in ways that could really create the public good in a shared economy and shared social benefits. Let me now turn to the third topic of climate change. Now, I don't think I have to say many things. This is dear to all of our hearts. This is something that we really, if we're going to reconstruct the world, and we're looking for a common ground, a point of entry where competing economies and conflicting ideas and ideologies can have a commonality so that we can develop trust and we can develop confidence. I think it is in climate change. Everywhere that we look, people are now absolutely concerned about how climate change is affecting the world. And what we really need to do as we look around, in business, in private life, to the old people, the young people, the rich and the poor, we're all affected by climate change. And Asia, of course, is in the midst of all this. There is a great need for climate multilateralism in Asia. We have huge populations that are in coastal areas that will definitely be completely affected by climate change. We also are really, in many places of Asia, a lack of fresh water, fresh drinking water, sweet water. And that, to me, is really the basis of food safety in all our food chains. So this whole idea of also looking at the transition from fossil fuel to renewable energy, I think Asia is taking the lead, and we really, in our future, need to think through how we build smart, sustainable cities to make urbanization a force for climate good. So for all these reasons, I think it's so important to us. It is the sort of really the point of commonality in which we can build trust for more cooperative, that we actually, in a sense, compete in a non-zero sum basis, not on a zero sum basis. And while in some areas we would definitely compete, but in some areas, especially key areas like climate change, we can find common ground and be able to cooperate. I think that is absolutely important for the world. Today, I think we celebrate China's announced commitment to net zero by 2060. Followed closely by net zero announcements in countries like Japan, Korea, and Hong Kong, and others also are looking at their net zero dates. I think this is a great start. I hope this will be the beginning of a trend that would actually allow us to really implement and deal with the whole issue and implement the Paris Accords without any delay. And this, of course, is the core part of the construction of the new multilateralism. So together with the importance and the centrality of trade, and also with the important work of harnessing the digital economy for the global public good, these three factors of trade, digitalization, climate change, I think really will form the basis of the new multilateralism. And as we look forward to the future of the multilateral world, I think we have to really keep this in mind. And I'm really happy to say that during the course of today, our experts have really given us food for thought in all these areas. And with all the difficulties and the practicalities that we need to face, and importantly, begin to allow us to form a vision for the future. So ladies and gentlemen, friends from around the world, it is getting late in more ways than one. In the decades since we convened like-minded people to establish the Fung Global Institute and then the Asian Global Institute, we've made progress on global challenges. However, progress has not always been easy. As I said, I've been witnessing the difficulties and the decline in many ways of multilateralism during this decade. But we remain committed to the task, and we do see light at the end of the tunnel for us to now think really of the future and have the really the hope of really doing something really substantial for our world with a future that is based on a multilateral approach. I dare say that multilateralism is now in a good place today, and it's on its way. So let me thank those who have continued to accompany me in this long journey. My AGI Advisory Board co-chair, Professor Mike Spence, the University Vice Chancellor, Professor Zhang Xiang, and also Ji Wu Chen, the AGI's director. I really thank all of you as my comrades in arms in this long-term quest. And also, I thank, of course, all the distinguished speakers that have joined us today in the AGD. Last but not least, of course, is the AGI team, headed by Yvonne Mack. You have worked so hard behind the scenes, and I'd like to thank you most sincerely for everything that you've done for the Asia Global Dialogue this year. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have covered a lot of ground today. I remain both an optimist about multilateralism and, frankly, also a realist on the work ahead. It is indeed the work of generations. So I look forward to seeing you back again at next year's AGD, online, or maybe in person, or frankly, maybe both. Good night, everybody.